What is functional medicine and how can it improve your mental health? Welcome back to another episode of the Mental Health Break. Ruby Ali, a functional medicine practitioner, joins me today to address the root cause of most diseases. Hi, I'm Dr. Nafisa Sikandri, a licensed clinical psychologist specializing in anxiety-based disorders. I created the Mental Health Break podcast to give you simple, actionable, step-by-step strategies to help you prioritize your mental health. Mental illness can cost you time and money. Ignoring your symptoms will only make the problems worse. Taking time out of your busy day to dedicate to improving your mental health can lead to long-term health and wellness. In this podcast, each week you'll learn tips, tricks, and proven strategies to help you regain control of your life, all while prioritizing your mental health. If you want to improve your life, regain control of your mental health, and feel empowered, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Today's episode is brought to you by the Transforming Anxiety course, an online, self-paced anxiety course to help you manage and control your anxiety from the comfort, privacy, and convenience of your own home. Learn how to transform your anxiety in just 6 short weeks. Course registration is now open. To learn more, visit transforminganxiety.com/course. I am so excited to talk to Ruby Ali today, who will talk to us about healing our gut so we can have better mental health. Let me introduce her briefly before I bring her on. Ruby Ali is a functional registered dietitian and transformation coach. She completed her training at Cleveland Clinic, the Center of Functional Medicine at the Institute of Functional Medicine in the School of Life. She specializes in helping people get to the root of their health issues by healing the deeper part of themselves. By focusing on gut health, hormonal health, and emotional health, they can live a life full of health, vitality, and happiness. Hi, Ruby. Thank you for joining me on the Mental Health Break podcast. I'm so glad to have you here.
Hi, Dr. Nafisa. Thank you so much for having me. I am excited to be here today.
And I'm excited to have you. So I briefly introduced you and shared a little bit about your background, but can you tell me a little bit more about your background as a registered dietitian and transformational coach, and what interested you in the field?
Absolutely. So I do specifically practice functional medicine, and I became a transformation coach after so many times deciding what kind of coach I want to be, because it just aligned well with my experiences and that of what I would like to help my client and how I like to help my client. And I, as a child, struggled with so many health problems, especially gut health, and depression was all part of my my life for a very long time. And I just couldn't find the answers to how to cope with it and how to heal myself in conventional medicine. In that route, I just never found any answer. So for me, I had taken a lot of alternative routes like Eastern medicine or Chinese medicine until I bumped into functional medicine and realized how profoundly it had affected me and my gut and really changed how I viewed health. And that's what also kind of led me into transformation coach, because for me, I have had a lot of trauma, and trauma also plays a really big role in how you heal. And so your nervous system especially goes through a major change when you've been through trauma, and how that actually plays a role, which hopefully we'll talk about, is how that affects your gut, which is really, really important if you want to actually deal with anxiety, stress, and depression, and any sort of mental health challenges that we come across. And those are really similar to what I have. I've been through literally all of them. And, gut health has been my number one area that I love specializing in. I do gut health, hormone health, and fatigue, of course, because they're really interrelated. And so I like to focus on those and really hone in on that. So that's how I started. That's how my crazy journey started to become a functional dietitian and a transformation coach.
Wow, that sounds so interesting. I like that you mentioned the role trauma plays in our gut, because a lot of people can have gut issues and GI distress and not really make that connection to emotional or mental health. So can you go into that right now and talk about the role that it can, the impact our mental health can have on our gut, and then the role the gut can have on our mental health, just connecting those two?
Of course. In research, for a long time, it had been found that we always thought in research or in the field of science that perhaps it's the mental health challenges that lead to gut health problem. But more and more recent research is showing it's actually vice versa. It's the opposite. So what we have is we have a vagus nerve, which is what connects our gut to our brain. And actually 90% of the information travels from your gut up to your brain. That's completely opposite of what we knew a long time ago, where now we know it's only 10% of information that's relayed to your gut from the brain. So it's completely opposite. And so many things play in that. When you go through trauma, your brain is affected because it produces completely different hormones. Like so we have parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. And when we've been through trauma, what we have is we have more of a sympathetic response, which is the fight or flight response. And in that response, your vagus nerve also, it's deeply affected, which actually is considered your 10th cranial nerve, and it's connected to every organ, specifically all the organs in your digestive tract, your liver, your kidney. It functions more like your parasympathetic functions, such as your heart rate, your breathing is affected, and of course your digestion. So when we're in a sympathetic state, that directly affects, obviously you can imagine that at that point your vagus nerve is affected because you no longer digest the food the same way that you used to. And your emotions actually from your trauma, the way we live our life in that state of fight or flight, always, anxiety or fear, and subconsciously those are there. Those are emotions that deeply affect us. In fact, in research, it has shown that when you have the emotion of anger, it affects your immune system for 6+ hours. To me, that is so profound. Like I think just starting to learn the effect emotions have on our gut. And we don't have in-depth information. We just don't have that much research on it yet. But we do know that emotions do impact your gut and they affect your microbiome. So we have over 500 million neurons in the gut, and we have almost 4 pounds of microbes. That's more than what our brain weighs, which is 2.6 pounds. And they control so many different neurotransmitters, and they actually relay information via the vagus nerve and neurotransmitters, of course, to your brain. So that's how that connection from gut and brain and gut is connected. And all these information is always being transmitted, either we know it or not. So every time you eat something, it affects what kind of neurotransmitter you're going to make. And the type of bacteria that you have actually also determines the type of neurotransmitter that they're going to make and they digest. So it goes into much in depth in understanding the different neurotransmitters that we have and how the microbes and how trauma and all of this just come together and affect each other.
Yeah, it's like we are at the service of the gut bacteria instead of the other way around, right? They have to be healthy and happy in order for us to be healthy and happy. So we have to make sure that they are doing their job. But can you give us an example of what poor gut health looks like? What are the symptoms that we should look like? And what could contribute to that?
Sure. So gut dysbiosis, every symptoms are really variable between individuals. But however, let's start with, I think one of the common symptoms that everyone experiences: bloating, gas, and indigestion. Those, we may not consider those as signs a lot of times or symptoms of dysbiosis in the gut. But if you're constantly experiencing that, or if you experience it after eating specific foods, then that's usually a sign from your body suggesting that there is some sort of disharmony there. That food does not align. That food is more of like not an allergenic, but more of a sensitivity which your body responds to with chronic low inflammation over time. An allergic reaction is when you have a full-blown instant allergic reaction. For example, many people are allergic to peanuts, but for, let's say, gluten, for example, there are many people that we know that are allergic have celiac disease, right? But those that are sensitive to it, they may not know they're sensitive, but those people that are sensitive can have indigestion, and then they can have bloating. They can also have a lot of other symptoms. You can have joint pain. Many times we experience joint pain, or you feel pain in different areas of your body. Something common I see in my practice is hand pain, and that's something I used to have it too. Like instantly, if I ate something that didn't agree with my body, then I started feeling pain in the hands, and that's when you know when something did not agree with your body. So the type of food, especially if you're eating a lot of sugar, you're feeding unhealthy bacteria. Your healthy bacteria thrive on fiber. They thrive on good whole foods, versus the unhealthy bacteria that thrives on sugar because they feed off of that, and then they can grow and proliferate, versus your healthy bacteria that needs fiber. And the byproduct of fiber is your vitamins and minerals and neurotransmitters that we need in the right amount. And they can then actually overtake and crowd out the bad bacteria, and they keep them in check. They're like the guards. They keep your unhealthy bacteria in check. And so your diet, whole foods diet is the best diet. You want to get a plethora of vegetables, you want to get minerals, you want to get fruits. And I'm not big on eating a lot of fruits. You want to have a good balance, because too much sugar, even coming from fruits, for some people have shown to still trigger dysbiosis, because it's a lot of sugar for their body. So it depends on everyone else. Everyone is different, especially because we may talk about dopamine. Dopamine is one of the neurotransmitter that actually has more of a motivation and reward effect on your body. So whenever you achieve something and you're successful in achieving a goal, that's what you actually experience. It's because of dopamine. And 50% of dopamine is actually produced in your gut. And so when you don't have enough dopamine, and that dopamine is a result of not having enough, is a result of eating food that did not agree with your body, because you don't have the right species and you don't have the right amount of the right food for your body to produce that specific neurotransmitter. So that's just one of them. And I know that dopamine is actually also related to anxiety, depression, stress, because all of these neurotransmitters, such as serotonin and GABA, which is gamma aminobutyric amino acid, they all play a role in your mental health as well.
Yeah, between 50% of dopamine and 90% of serotonin and all the other neurochemicals in our gut, it all starts in the gut. For those people that are struggling with GI distress and dysbiosis and constipation, diarrhea, whatever, just a lot of just gut health issues, a lot of impairments, what are some suggestions that you have that they can get some relief, or at least even focus on maybe reversing some of the damage that they're dealing with right now?
So I'm going to talk about constipation to start with, because that's something many people struggle with as well. That is also one of the dysbiosis sign. A lot of times, for some it could be constipation, for some it could be diarrhea. But in those that suffer from constipation, it has shown that they usually or generally have low serotonin levels. And if one wants to increase serotonin levels, it's important to first really figure out what foods make you sensitive. So I'm always a big fan of journaling. So with journaling, you can save hundreds of dollars if you don't have money to start with, or go do advanced lab testing for food sensitivities. Then I suggest starting with a journal and write down what you're eating, and then what you're feeling up to 2 hours after. You may do this on the weekend or one day during the week, so you get a good idea of the difference as well. And so then go from there and see what foods are causing problem, and then eliminate those from your diet. So this way you get relief, because instantly when you take those food out of your diet, you will feel a mental clarity, you will feel different, you will feel lighter, and your symptoms will reduce. You'll feel better instantly. And if you feel like that you're still not feeling better, then I suggest, paying a little bit more attention and writing down what you were eating and exactly what you were feeling. Because a lot of times we don't think, even if it's like how you were thinking, like if you were feeling more anxious, let's say you had a meal at lunch and you were feeling more anxious after 1 hour, write that down, because that is still something your bacteria, your microbe plays a role in. So write that down. Some foods that are really helpful for serotonin are especially, one of my favorite is pineapple. Pineapple are full of serotonin, so that's a good way. If you suffer from constipation, I suggest you can try pineapples. You can try some clean form of grass-fed or organic cheese, salmon, any poultry, nuts and seeds are good choices for increasing serotonin. For GABA, for increasing GABA, which is actually associated with also depression and anxiety, but it has a protective effect, a calming effect on your body. So it actually protects your brain, it helps you with your sleep cycle, it does so many wonderful things. And so fermented foods, I'm sure you've heard about fermented foods such as kimchi. You can have, there's different ones, tempeh, miso, there are different options available, but kimchi, fermented foods in general, they actually are filled with lactobacilli bacteria. They have hundreds of species in there. It would take a book to write it down, but they have so many different species in there that can really make a profound difference in your gut and increase the diversity. Slipping on my words there, but the point is that we want to have a diverse microbiome. When you've been through a lot of stress, or when you've been through trauma, or when you've went to many chronic diseases where you've been through so many different rounds of antibiotics, that depletes your gut. So in order to have relief, we want to build everything back up. We want to include foods, like I've mentioned, and we want to start paying attention to our stress. We want to include some techniques like meditation, or that is to increase more vagal tone, working on your vagus nerve, which is going to improve your digestion. It's going to improve that whole GI tract system because it affects it. And so we want to make sure that we're including all these areas. It's not just one part ever that affects your health or improves your symptoms. It's not like I can say just eat pineapple and you'll be fine. It's actually the collection of doing a couple of different things in order to get the result that you're looking for, especially if it's long term, because over time it becomes a lifestyle. For you, it'll be second nature. Like you start doing it, it's a little bit of work, but over time it's going to be something you'll be super comfortable with. I think those different things that I've mentioned are going to be really, really helpful for you to have that approach that you're looking for to get some relief from your digestive system distress.
You also work with hormonal imbalances, right? And the hormones can definitely cause constipation or diarrhea as well, especially for women during different times of their menstrual cycle. Can you talk about that connection between hormonal imbalance and gut imbalance, and how are they related and how do they affect each other?
Absolutely. So one of the biggest hormonal imbalance that we see in gut dysbiosis is estrogen dominance. And that's because when you have dysbiosis, your microbes play such a big role in producing. When you have a diversified microbiome, they all work in harmony into producing different hormones, and especially estrogen. The estrogen metabolism is so important. There are different kinds of estrogens that's produced in the body, and in order to eliminate those estrogen that the body does not need in timely manner, when you have constipation, that estrogen actually gets recycled in the body and hence you have more dominant estrogen. So in order for that to work, it's important to have a high fiber diet, which is super important because not only is that going to increase diversity, it's going to help decrease the excess estrogen that the body does not need. That in itself will actually affect the progesterone, because that is something for women, especially if they're on their cycle, the luteal phase, which is the second half of your cycle, and that's what's needed, especially if you're trying to get pregnant and fertility something you're looking for, or even just a balance overall, especially if you have PCOS or any hormonal imbalances. When you make your detoxification efficient by eating specific foods, especially including high fiber foods and whole foods, that's going to help balance hormones as well, because it removes the excess estrogen, and that can actually be problematic for many of us, because the source of estrogen comes from so many sources, right? We have grain-fed beef, we have hormones and antibiotics that are actually fed to animals, especially if you're leading an animal-based diet, then that's actually really big. And that's why I highly recommend, if you can, choose organic when you can, or use grass-fed, because that will by itself decrease the amount of antibiotics or hormones that are going into your body. And because those animals are fed grains and that's not their natural diet, and then we consume that food, and then so that still affects us. And so I highly recommend looking into that too, and changing that in your diet. Even if it's a small step, just start with something small. So I think that's a big one, because that in itself will affect, estrogen, as I just said, and progesterone. So it'll balance a lot of your hormones. It'll balance mood. It just has that one effect that everything else starts to balance, because it's, when usually one thing goes wrong, everything else starts falling back. And so when you fix one thing a lot of times with the gut, then everything starts falling into a rhythm. So that's a perfect start.
So a lot of things can negatively impact our gut bacteria. You talked about hormones, you talked about antibiotics, you talked about, but there's other things. Can you talk about some ways that we can damage our gut without even realizing it? And it could be chemicals, it could be lifestyle, but if you can get into that a little bit, and how we can inadvertently damage our gut environment, as well as just destroy our bacteria.
Absolutely. I'm going to start with stress, because stress is the number one form of, I would say, everything combined, environmental, lifestyle, chemical. It's so impactful. And studies have actually shown that stress can change your microbiome. And it affects pretty fast. Like I mentioned earlier, that stress, or actually anger, is an emotion that actually leads to affecting your immune system. And for 6+ hours, stress has shown that it affects so many different processes in your body, especially in these neurotransmitters, decreasing them, affecting your microbiome. And it creates an environment in your body that actually, when there's an imbalance of these neurotransmitters, what happens is, when I was mentioning dopamine especially, dopamine is what protects your mucosal lining. It plays a protective role in it. So when your neurotransmitters are off, what happens is, over time, when that continues, and in these days in our society, we're all overly stressed. So the best thing you can start with is some form of practice that's going to help you decrease your daily stress. That's like one of the best ways you can start with, that's going to affect your gut lining, because when your gut barrier starts becoming affected, it actually breaks, and we call that leaky gut. And so in leaky gut, what happens is, when you're consuming food, those little particles can cross the barrier, enter your bloodstream. And that's when we have an immune reaction, because that's foreign material for your body. And so there's a cascade of immune effect that goes into, now there's this inflammation that has to fight it. And for some people that are sensitive to foods, or that have chronic stress, that inflammation becomes chronic, because it just stays that way. So in order to change that, and in order to heal your gut, especially if you're suffering from leaky gut, or even if you don't suffer from leaky gut, because Stress actually affects your vagus nerve. Your vagal tone decreases, which is how good your vagus nerve functions, and that affects how much enzymes you produce, how much hydrochloric acid, which is the acid that you need to produce when you don't have enough acid in your stomach when you're digesting food. That's when H. pylori, different bacteria harbors, and you're making room for them, and that's when your digestion is slow. Food sits in your belly longer, so you have indigestion. Actually, many people that are acid reflux, most of the time, it's probably because they have a lower acid, not high acid. So that has, I have seen that myself. It's something I've suffered with before. And many of my clients, I've seen that it actually is the opposite. So it's something you want to talk to whoever you're working with, your practitioner. You want to make sure you do a test and see how that affects you, because not having enough acid is also, caused by stress. So that creates all sorts of other problems. So stress is the number one thing. And I highly suggest either that's meditation for you, either that's a little bit of time that you keep for yourself away, or you establish a breathing technique that you can do whenever you feel stressed. Maybe you go into breathing and then you leave that 5 minute of time for yourself, so that will automatically put you into a parasympathetic state, which will decrease your stress response and decrease your cortisol, which is the hormone also increased due to stress. And so that causes all sorts of hormonal problems, weight gain, obesity, liver problems. So that can go into a cascade of different issues. So if you're going to start with anything, it's stress.
Well, we can say stress and environmental toxins and lack of sleep. So, I mean, we can just go on and on, right? There's a lot of things that can impact our gut.
Absolutely, and the list is so long. Honestly, the chemicals that from our food package, or the type of cleaning products we use at home, and then the type of cooking products that we use. So there, we can go in so in depth with this, and so it can definitely be long. But I think stress is often, we don't think of stress as a factor that's affecting our health so much, but just by having some of those practices in place, we can really alleviate a lot of the problem and then focus on other things.
Well, I think, I mean, even though I'm in the field and I know enough about all this, it's just recently within the last maybe 5 years that I made the connection with why stress impacts so much, and it has to do with that vagal nerve. And that's because when we're in a stress, fight or flight mode, our body has to be in it's in a fight or flight, and it's not in rest and digest. So we're not digesting, we're not repairing, we're not healing, and it completely disrupts and shuts that down. Like you said, if it's taking us 6 hours just to get over anger, imagine how much it takes us to get over some other traumatic event or a shock or a fear. And so if we're constantly in a state of fight or flight and not in rest and repair, then this is going to take its toll over the years, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that's why many people, they continuously suffer with chronic issues, and it just builds on one another. You're trying to heal one and you go on a medication, you try to work on that, and something else shows up because the root cause has never been solved yet. And so we need to first go back to that root cause and figure out what's causing that, heal that, and then we look at other things. If they're still bothering you, then now what's the cause?
I see it as little fires around your house that keep popping up. And instead of figuring out what's causing the fires, we're just kind of putting them out as they come out without really realizing the long-term damage it could have, which could destroy our house, right? Our gut environment is the house for all of those trillions of bacteria. So we need to make sure we're taking care of them and focusing on making sure that they're healthy and thriving and happy.
Absolutely, absolutely. We are more bacteria than we are regular cells in our body. So we need to take care of everything. We have bacteria inside us, on our skin, it's in the air, it's everywhere around us.
Well, with everything that's been happening since 2020, with the excessive use of antibacterials and hand sanitizers, what are your thoughts about the impact that they're having on our gut and our bacteria? Because, like you said, we are more bacteria than human, and yet we're using these products that are killing and damaging or even making them more resistant. How is that impacting our gut health? And have you noticed anything in your clinic with all that?
So one thing I think the most important part with that is that, yes, I agree. What you said is we're so into making our environment so sterile that we don't have this species. We don't have, this is why like kids, when they used to grow up in older times, they used to play out in the soil, and they used to get all the different diverse microbiome. And then now it's like whenever we play in the soil or we touch something, instantly we want to use sanitizer. That affects your bacteria, because we're constantly sanitizing. Bacteria is so smart that they can, or viruses that we're always looking to fight, some bacteria and viruses, like we're using antibacterial soap, but they keep replicating in a different way and changing, that it's getting harder to harder. And your body just, over time, it's like you just keep using it. You're not allowing yourself to grow because you want to keep your environment sterile. Our body is not meant to be super sterile. There are some bacteria we want to prevent, but most of the time you want to be able to, it's okay to go out and touch a tree, and you don't have to use an antibacterial soap or antibacterial whatever else that you're going to use, in the house, and spray all of that. We need the environment to be more natural, like in nature, where bacteria is just naturally present. We have a mutual relationship with most of the bacteria, at least, and so we want to keep that environment. The more sterile your environment becomes, the more sensitive you become over time, because your body doesn't have the bacteria anyway, and you react much faster to when something else comes, because now your body doesn't have that immunity, doesn't build itself. Especially for kids growing up, if you keep them in a cleaner environment and don't allow them to play out, just like when we grew up we did, but when you don't allow them, what happens is they do not build immunity against different kind of species, and then they react to everything. So our body becomes inflammatory response towards everything. So in order to avoid that, it's important that we don't become so strict with having to keep our environment sterile all the time.
And a lot of people, I guess, don't make that connection that they're living in such sterile environments. Their kids are getting sick and they're getting asthma. They're so reactive. They're allergic to all different kinds of foods because of that super sterile environment. They don't have that diversity in their gut, and their immune system isn't very strong. It all plays in itself, and our reaction and response is just to take more medication instead of looking at, okay, what are we doing? We're constantly using hand sanitizers. We're using antibacterial soap. Everything is bleached. Everything is super sterile. And so we're not eating the foods that are diversifying the microbiome inside. And so we're wondering what's causing all the inflammation and the disease and the reactions. And our skin is like the most important first step, as far as if there's anything going on in our gut, it'll show up on our skin, right?
Yeah.
So and as a kid, I used to have acne, I used to break out, and I didn't make that connection. I wish I knew then to eat healthy and keep and focus on my gut bacteria, because instead of putting all those chemicals on my skin, hoping for the acne to go away. So all of that's connected, and this is why I'm so passionate about gut health and making sure, because it's not just our physical, but it also, like you mentioned, it also affects our mental health. It affects everything. These little guys are controlling us, and we need to make sure we're playing nice with them and be friends with them instead of fighting them, right?
Exactly. And that's why the saying goes is, when you're eating food, it's not what you can digest, it's what your microbes can digest. And so it's very important. And that's why gut health is super important, because literally think about it, because it's our digestive system. The food that we eat and the microbes that we eat, that's what makes up our cells. Like the fats, the type of fats we eat, your cell membranes are made of that fat. And that affects the type of response, the cell response that we're going to have to different things that are happening in our body or environment and stress. It all changes depending on the type of membrane you have, the type of fat it's made with. So it's actually incredible, because when we're nourishing our body and our body is full of healthy food and healthy bacteria, we can pretty much, our body's equipped to fight bacteria. It can fight invaders and protect itself. It only knows how to heal. It's just the environment. We have to create the right environment. We cannot expect the body to heal if the environment is off. It's like one of the best example is taking a fish tank, keep putting dirty water in and feeding and trying for it to get healthy at the same time. It just doesn't work. You have to you have to change the water, and you have to feed it so that it can start thriving and healing again.
I love that example. That's so true. That's what we're doing. We're constantly exposing ourselves to things that are bad for us. And then we're hoping that that's going to somehow, by taking more medication, that's going to make things better. Speaking of Band-Aid approach, are there any supplements that you would recommend? Is there, like, for me, I feel like I'm sending them food and nourishment, and then also additional soldiers, so that I can diversify my gut biome. So do you recommend probiotics? Are there any supplements that you would recommend for healing our gut and staying healthy?
Sure. So my general go-to with supplement is very personalized because everyone is different. And so this is just a generalized recommendation. I do recommend probiotics only when your gut has been healed. If you have a lot of gut issues instantly or initially, like let's say you came to me and you're working with me and instantly I see that you have a lot of gut issues, I generally recommend more food sources if we need to, like fermented foods. It's one of the best ways you can get a probiotic because it's full of healthy bacteria, hundreds of different species. But when it comes to supplements, that's more targeted because in gut health, there's called a 5R system. And so we go to different stages. First, we remove the culprit, and then we want to re-inoculate eventually, and then we want to do all these different things. And the re-inoculate part is where the probiotics will pop in, and then we'll add specific probiotics depending on your needs and depending on what's going on with you. So if I had to recommend that as a supplement, some of the general ones that we all should have is at least the lactobacillus and bifidobacterium family. I think that species is really important, and they're present in fermented foods. They're present in yogurt. So those are some of the things you can start with and include it in your diet, so that it doesn't feel like you have to supplement an extra. But another supplement that actually it's called ashwagandha. It's used in Ayurveda, and actually it's really good because it helps your adrenals and your stress response. And so that's something, whoever you're working with, I highly suggest looking into, because nowadays, especially when we are so stressed all the time, that just helps protect your body and support your body while you're trying to make all these changes. And it supports your adrenal, your vagus nerve, and all wonderful things that we want. So if I have to recommend, those would be two of them that I would say that if you're going to go on probiotics, then wait till you're going during that healing process, and you can start with ashwagandha.
And I do want to stress the fact that we're just making generalized recommendations, and to talk to your primary care physician or integrative medical professional or somebody that knows about gut health is on the same page as you as far as the importance of healing the gut health, and talk to somebody and work with somebody that's professional before starting anything on your own. That's so important. But like you did mention some really good tips as far as getting it from the food source as much as possible. There's so many wonderful fermented foods. Like when it comes to yogurt, I don't want to recommend conventional yogurts that are filled with sugar and sweeteners. Go for plain whole fat yogurt, organic preferably. I have a really good recipe I can include in the show notes of making yogurt at home, which is so simple, no equipment needed. I make my yogurt all the time. And there's also sauerkraut that you can eat, which I've recently become familiar with, and I love it. There's also a lot of prebiotics that people can eat, right? Like a lot of fiber-rich foods. One of that I don't know, have you tried Jerusalem artichokes? I mean, they're not regular artichokes, but have you had them?
I have had them. They are actually wonderful prebiotic. The other popular one is a resistant starch, which actually feeds your microbiome. And my favorite is, I've generally always liked a green banana. Like if you ever want to just have, it's actually also a low FODMAP, so most people don't get triggered and it doesn't feed the unhealthy bacteria species. So a green banana actually serves as a prebiotic. So you can include that every day with your meal, and just include it to just make sure you're eating half. So half with a source of healthy fat, so you have a healthy blood sugar response in return as well.
So that would look like almond butter or maybe peanut butter or adding it to your protein smoothie. That'll kind of help with that.
Exactly. Or what I generally do is if I want, when I'm craving half a green banana, is include some walnuts and then add a little bit of pecan butter or almond butter on there as well, or pumpkin seeds. So you have a nice mix of nuts and seeds with the fruit. So you have a very low glycemic response, low blood sugar response.
That sounds really delicious. That's a really good combination. I like that.
Yeah, that is. And I think another food, now that we're talking about food, obviously I definitely agree with you, is that grass-fed or Greek yogurt with really no sugar added is the best way. I'm not a fan of fruit combined with sugar either. So, I mean, fruit combined with the yogurt, because it just adds all that added sugar. We don't need that. And so, yeah, definitely that way. And kefir is another good one. Just make sure there's a grass-fed source. If you can find A2 cows specifically, they just digest differently. They have a lot less allergenic effects for most people. So if you can find that, I know Whole Foods do carry it. If you're going to include that, then you can find those. But otherwise, grass-fed, anything grass-fed, good source. If you know the farmer, the best. I love to get to know them and their practices, and then choose those over conventional anytime.
Yeah, of course. And I think if, instead of focusing on what you can't have, focus on all the delicious new foods you can try. I didn't know anything about Jerusalem artichokes. In fact, I was kind of afraid to eat them. They look like little ginger tubers, and it's like I didn't know what they were. And you eat them raw, and I really like the little crunch. They're very refreshing. The same with jicama. And I know both of those are a favorite of my gut bacteria. So I eat them as often as I can because I know they enjoy it.
Exactly. Asparagus is another good one too. They actually also are prebiotics. So there's a bunch of different foods, and those are easy to find as well. But I do actually have, if anyone was interested, I do have a gut health quiz that I specifically created for if you want to find out to know how, where you may be falling in your gut area. And that's a good way to get started if that's something you're concerned with too.
That's a perfect segue on where can people find you and communicate with you and reach out to you, and then tell us about your website and your quiz.
Of course. So my website is at www.simplysupercharged.com. And I am on Instagram at Simply Supercharged. I'm on Facebook at Simply Supercharged. I'm on Pinterest at Simply Supercharged. And I have a YouTube channel as well. So you can look up Simply Supercharged on YouTube, and I'll pop up and you'll see my picture. But the gut health quiz is specifically created because it's something, I'm obviously passionate about gut health. So for me, I feel like there's so many different symptoms that, yes, we can all experience, but there's some very prominent one that goes with leaky gut, SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. That can be a whole different topic. But, and then just having where you just don't have that diverse microbiome. So it kind of delves into with different questions, and it's just carefully curated by me specifically to get you. It gives you a guide that can help you to know what's your number one place to start at, and you can start there.
So knowing what you know now, and especially having had trauma and gut issues growing up, what would you go back and tell your younger self with everything that you know now?
Oh, what a great question. That's a surprise. Okay, so what would I tell myself, my younger self? I would tell my younger self to, I think I would say what Hippocrates used to say, is that the famous saying that goes that your food is your medicine. So be careful every time you pick up your fork. It's one of the most powerful choices that you ever make. So be careful what you want to tell your body when you're picking that fork up and what food is going inside of you.
And what kind of message you want to send to your body, right?
Exactly, because your food is information. So when you eat, specific foods, it tells you how you feel. If you feel happy after, that's a good meal. If you can go 3 to 4 hours without getting super hungry, you've done a good job.
Yeah. And that takes time. And I want people to understand that making these changes should not be overnight. Slowly take one goal. Maybe it's to reduce your sugar, or maybe it's to swap your yogurt with Greek yogurt instead of the ones that are full of sugar. Maybe it's just drinking more water and then slowly adding until you get to where you want to be, not to overwhelm your senses and feel like I have to do everything at once. I like that idea of leaning into things, leaning into change, and not feeling like you have to do everything at once.
Oh, I absolutely agree, because it can become so overwhelming just to look at that you have to do everything at once. No, definitely, I definitely agree with you. Start with one step that you can do and then commit to that. And once that becomes habitual, then add something else on where you feel comfortable, because that's what's going to give you long-term results.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for taking the time and joining me and having this conversation with me today. That was so informative.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I love talking about good health. That was great. My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I hope you found the information in this episode helpful. Let me know what you learned during this episode by leaving me a comment. To share your thoughts and learn more about Ruby, please visit transforminganxiety.com/34. And be sure to check out her 4-minute gut quiz and my free homemade yogurt recipe. If you're enjoying the Mental Health Break podcast, please don't forget to subscribe so you'll always know when there's a new episode. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please be sure to give us a review or a 5-star rating, since that'll help others find the podcast. I can't wait to see you here next week. Same time, same place. Bye for now.